honorable members, our support staff, members of the public who are on the platform, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, good morning to this session of the joint sitting of the Standing Committee on Appropriations and the Select Committee on Appropriations. We are considering the second adjustment appropriation bill today, public hearings. Welcome to COSATU, because it's them who will be making a presentation today. But before we proceed, can I check with you, Lubabalo? Do we have any apologies?
Thank you, Chairperson. Good morning, Chairperson and honorable members. Chairperson will only have one apology from Honorable Njato. He will join the meeting a little bit later.
Thank you so much. We'll note that. Darren?
Chairperson, from Standing Committee on Appropriations, we have one apology from Mr. Sarupen. Thank you.
That apology will be noted. Honorable Chairperson Mahlangu, anything before we proceed from your side?
Nothing from my side, Chair.
Thank you. Good morning. Very colorful.
Because it
Okay. Thank you. Comrade Matthew, are you there? Are you ready?
Yes, good morning, honorable chair members. Yes, we're here and ready when you're happy for us to start.
Yes. No, we are considering the second adjustment appropriation bill. And thank you very much. You are a busy man these days. I know workers are hugely underpaid, but whatever cent we are earning, we are really earning that cent. We're with you yesterday, and we do appreciate the interaction, as the oral members were saying yesterday, that we may not agree on everything, but there is no substitute for the value of engaging, so that we also understand what the public out there is thinking about us, and is also thinking about the budgets that we are considering. With those few words, please take us through your presentation. You know, oral members, what we'll then do after the presentation by COSATU, we'll then invite questions and comments from yourselves, and after that, COSATU will have to respond to whatever we have brought up. That's I think let's confine ourselves to that. As you know, after that, we'll be having responses from National Treasury about the appropriation bill in general. I think please take us through your presentation. Thank you.
No, good morning, Chair and members. Yeah, no, thanks very much for giving us space just to present our submission on the bill. And I think, Chair, we won't even need to take the full 20 minutes. I think it's a very straightforward but important bill, so I'm sure we can do it in 10 minutes or so. So I think, Chair, just to say, look, as COSATU, as a federation, we support the second adjustments appropriation bill. We believe that this 18.1 billion rand appropriated for SASRIA, it helped provide critical relief to thousands of workers and families and businesses who really suffered huge losses during the violence and the vandalism that we witnessed engulfing KZN and Gauteng last year. The 500 million rand to support the COVID-19 vaccine program, we believe was key to saving thousands of lives and livelihoods. So we support the bill's passage by Parliament. We think it's a no-brainer. It's progressive. We must do it. So I think, Chair, we want to welcome, on the SASRIA front, we want to welcome the 18 billion rand appropriation for SASRIA. We have witnessed ourselves through our affiliates, through members and workers on the ground across KZN and even Gauteng. It really has helped thousands of companies who suffered significant losses to stock. It enabled them to restock, to reopen. We believe that this has helped prevent thousands of workers who otherwise would have lost their jobs in these companies, in the clothing industry, in the retail sector, hotels, garages, and so forth. even farms as well in parts of KZN. We think this has helped enable workers who had lost wages to get back to work, to earn a salary, to go back to taking care of their families and pick up the pieces. The SASRA Appropriation Chair has also helped to provide relief to thousands of workers who lost property, lost cars, their homes were damaged, they lost personal items and so forth. And we think this is in line with the state's mandate to support SASRA as needed and to ensure South Africans are covered in the event of riots or violence, because of the insurance companies don't always provide that relief, and not all South Africans, in fact, the majority of South Africans wouldn't have such insurance. I think, Chair, whilst appreciating the relief, we must express the frustration of workers at times with the speed at which SASRA and government dispense some of the payments in the relief. I think we appreciate, we understand that government had not experienced this kind of situation, not in our, not since post-94, in reality, not at this scale. And so it's kind of uncharted territories. We appreciate there's logistical concerns, there's need to manage corruption and verification, etc. But I think, Chair, we also want to kind of emphasize that whilst the difficulties of managing such a crisis are understandable from the state, from SASRA, but the delays that ordinary families and workers experience are really unbearable at times. Even a delay of 1 day, 1 week, a month, 3 months, it really has huge personal consequences for them. So we think that let's use this as a learning experience. How can SASRA and government consider in future faster response times, clearer lines of communication and appeal mechanisms for persons in such situations in future? But really, we can't afford to see workers and the poor waiting for months for relief. And, as a consequence, Chair, and I'm sure members who are from KwaZulu-Natal or Gauteng would have witnessed during the constituency work, the consequence is people at times sleeping on the street, in community halls. And of course, in those scenarios, you're really exposed to violence, especially for women and children. And people also, if they can't secure the property, the assets will be looted and stolen. So, Chair, just on the COVID-19 vaccine appropriation, I think as COSATU, we support this appropriation. We believe as COSATU and our affiliates, this COVID-19 vaccines have been proven highly effective and have helped save thousands of lives and jobs. I think we are convinced that they are the reason why during the 4th wave and the current 5th wave, that even whilst these waves gathered pace and infection rates rose significantly, but we saw that serious illness, hospitalization, and death rates remain significantly under control. And that's exactly what the vaccine is meant to do, that we could adjust to a new normal and we save lives and livelihoods. We also believe these vaccines, Chair, have really helped ease the burden on health workers. At times in the 3rd wave, the situation was so bad for health workers in Gauteng and other epicenters where they had to treat patients, receive patients in parking lots, where at times nurses and doctors had to choose which patient that they thought could be saved and which one there's just very little they could do. And we shouldn't be putting our health workers in such untenable situations. We've also seen health workers really being exhausted to the point of physical and emotional collapse because of the huge strain of COVID-19. And of course, themselves being at really high risk. Many nurses died from COVID. So we think, Chair, the vaccines have really helped save thousands of workers' lives and enabled their families to be cared for because the family member could continue to live, to work, to earn an income. So we also think that we saw the job stats yesterday, which were, optimistic or positive rather. We think that the reason why we're able to kind of see the unemployment rate decrease by 1% and about, I think, 375,000 jobs being created, albeit over the festive season. But I think partly is that the vaccine has enabled the economy to reopen. We've been able to remove the remaining disaster management restrictions. Companies can go back to operating, to hiring workers. Workers can go back to earning a salary. Chair, we've also for many years been talking about, as a nation, about building a local pharmaceutical manufacturing industry. And we have the capacity to do it. We have the basis for it. This has really helped provide a critical injection in that local manufacturing industry. We would know that in Gqeberha, Johnson & Johnson partnered with Aspen to set up a manufacturing plant. And this is, we've been able to produce a huge amount of vaccines for South Africa, for the continent. So that's a kind of critical injection into that kind of, rebuilding manufacturing sector. But also we think it's critical to have those kind of industries, Chair, because in future, we don't want to be caught in a scenario where we're waiting upon Europe or North America or Asia to provide vaccines to us. Let's rather have that local capacity here to protect our people's lives, to also provide that solidarity with the rest of the continent, not to be held to ransom with a kind of the vaccine hoarding we saw in Europe and other places. But having said that, Chair, I think we're also very concerned about the plummeting rate of vaccinations. And as a consequence, Chair, many vaccines are expiring. And as a consequence, the Department of Health is having to dispose of them, to destroy them. So this is a wasteful expenditure that we are imposing as society upon government. We think, Chair, that government has done well on the vaccine front. We must give government credit for securing the vaccines, for paying for them with the medical aid industry. We think we must really kind of applaud the work done by government, by business to make sure these vaccines are available. They set up 4,000 sites at quick notice. And we, I think last week we achieved that 50% vaccination threshold for the adult population. But I think, Chair, we must be concerned about how low the vaccination rates have plummeted. Last year we were doing about 200,000 vaccinations a day during the week. We're now sitting at about a quarter of that on a daily basis. I think most South Africans, even those who are vaccinated, haven't gone for the booster shots. So really it's a discussion we need to have as a society because it doesn't reflect well upon us. Chair, we appreciate social media and all of that, but we don't think we should be indulging in what at times very bizarre conspiracy theories. We appreciate, democracies are noisy, we have robust discussions, but we think on the vaccine front, the vaccines have proven themselves for many pandemics, cholera, polio, typhoid, hepatitis, measles, mumps, for many years, many decades. Vaccines have always been proven to be very effective in saving lives and livelihoods. We think also, Chair, that science must really be left to scientists, not to social media. We should really be appreciative that in South Africa we have very competent statutory bodies like SAPRA, the Medicine Control Council, etc., which really have done wonders on this front. So, Chair, we are kind of concerned as COSATU, just getting to the end, about the levels of complacency that many South Africans are showing towards vaccinating for the first time and to receiving the booster shots. Chair, we don't think we should be complacent because there could be other variants coming again. And maintaining our vaccination levels is critical to maintaining our immunity levels and to avoiding further economic lockdowns, which we simply cannot afford. And there's no more money left in the UIF anyway to sustain shutting down the economy again. So, Chair, just in terms of ourselves as COSATU and our affiliates, we've done a fair amount of work around mobilizing workers and the families to vaccinate. I think as a consequence, you can see many sectors where the unions operate. And I think for DUSA, our other colleagues too have also done good work. But we can see many sectors where we operate. In the clothing and textile industry, where SACTU through the Bargaining Council Clinics has mobilized, I think, about 80% of clothing and textile workers and the families to vaccinate. We've seen similar, high rates of vaccination for teachers, for police officers, prison wardens, obviously for healthcare workers. But even in the mining sector, I know there are some mining companies which have achieved 99% vaccination rates. And I think largely because of a collaboration between government, trade unions, and business, because we all have the same interests at heart. So we are also seeing how can we revive our own campaigns as organized labor to mobilize those who have not vaccinated to do so, and those who have not gone for the booster shots to do so as well. And yeah, I think for us, that's also about our contribution as organized labor towards rebuilding this economy and towards saving lives and supporting the work done by colleagues in government and business. So yeah, in conclusion, Chair, I think we just want to simply say we support this bill and this passage by Parliament. And I think we're here today to appreciate the work done by government on these two fronts and to appreciate that good work. Yeah, so that's our presentation in a nutshell, Chair. And yeah, thanks very much to members and Chairperson.
Thank you so much for that to the point presentation about the second adjustment appropriation bill. I would just like to check with the oral members. Lubabalo and Darren will help me up recognizing the hands of the oral members who would like to interact with the presentation.
Matafa?
Okay, Honorable Matafa. Is it Honorable Ryder?
Yes, Chairperson.
Honorable Ryder. Honorable members, I'm waiting.
Moletsane, Chair. Honorable
Honorable-
Moletsane, Chair.
Honorable Moletsane. Yes, honorable members, I'm also looking at my screen here.
Peters.
Honorable Peters. Yes, honorable members. I think Matthew, it's a straightforward presentation. I'll allow the honorable members to come in. Honorable Matafa, please start.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good morning to yourself and Chairperson Mahlangu, honorable members and guests. Now, Chair, let me start first by thanking Comrade Matthew for his presentation. And secondly, let me agree with you that the presentation is straightforward. And as a result, I will not have much to say, but to appreciate the presentation, but just maybe to ask one question, which is related to vaccine hesitancy. I agree fully with COSATU that there is a concern that needs addressing of vaccine hesitancy, and also welcome the efforts that in the working space they have undertaken. Now, my question is just one. In all the numerous efforts that government had tried to implement to motivate citizens to go and vaccinate, what is COSATU's view that could have been the gaps that the state failed to identify and close? Could it have been the messaging, or could it be the platforms that were used to communicate the importance and significance of vaccination? Or were we just unable to reach the desired audience as far as the age categories are concerned? Maybe they would have picked up areas that the government would have missed. And I'd really appreciate it if they can share with us if they have reflected on such. What is their view as far as that is concerned? That is the only question that I have, Chair, but once again, thank you for the presentation and the opportunity to participate. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Matafa. Honorable Ryder, it's your turn, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. Good morning, and yeah, appreciation for the presentation. It is indeed straightforward, but I do think we need to acknowledge, COSATU always shows up. So whether we agree with them, disagree with them, doesn't matter. They show up, and we need to appreciate their inputs. Yeah, I think that, yeah, Mr. Parks has covered most of the salient points. Couple of things that I want to add, though, because I do think that as we appropriate money, we also need to consider how it's being spent. And one of my big disappointments with the health department, specifically through the pandemic, has been that there's been a lot of additional funding pushed towards health. And I understand a lot of it had to do with procuring vaccines, etc. But noting that we only have less than 30% of the population that is vaccinated at this stage. The amount of funding that was pushed towards health could not have been taken up entirely with procuring vaccines. And if one looks around at the state of our hospitals, at the state of our clinics, at the waiting times at the clinics at the moment, and at even the mobile clinics, and I think particularly the mobile clinics, their reliability is in question. And it just seems to me that the money that's been appropriated towards the health department has been spent in quick fixes. And I mean, yeah, so let's use a medical analogy and say we just put a Band-Aid on a severed limb. And there hasn't been any long-term benefits from the substantial spending. And I do think as we appropriate money, we need to make sure that money is being spent in the best way possible so that we can have long-term benefits from short-term expenditure. It's been my great disappointment through the pandemic and the subsequent few months. And you know, as much as I think that we do need to appropriate the money on the special appropriation bill, I think that we certainly need to start looking at how the money is being spent a lot more closely, because I don't believe we've actually achieved proper value for money in the massive amounts that have been spent on health over the last 2.5 years. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Ryder. Honorable Litsani, please come in.
Thank you, Chairperson. My question is almost similar to what Honorable Ryder have spoken about. I wanted to check with the COSATU that realizing that the COVID-19 did affect workers at their working place, as COSATU, did they ever made a follow-up to make sure that the money it is spent for what it's meant for, as a way of accountability? Thank you, Chairperson.
Honorable Letsani, thank you very much. Honorable Peters. Honorable Peters, please come in. I know Honorable Peters may be struggling with her connectivity. I see this Honorable Karim. Honorable Karim, please come in.
Yeah, thank you, Chairperson. Just very quickly. Firstly, it may just be me. I'm not saying because I feel this way, therefore that's an objective reality, but I'm surprised that COSATU has done so much on vaccines, and such a high percentage of some of its unions members actually have been vaccinated. Maybe, as I said, it's just me, but I haven't seen that so much in the media. And even if others have seen it, maybe COSATU should advertise this more, Chairpersons, because, you know, I think obviously there are many reasons why people don't want to vaccinate. Some of them quite understandable. One of them seems to me, they don't really trust us as government, parliament, politicians generally. So the fact that COSATU has mobilized around this, since it's a high percentage of some of its affiliates actually have vaccinated, might influence some people. So the questions I have to COSATU are, look, you're doing quite a lot from what you tell us now to get people to vaccinate your members. But maybe it's also helpful if the members themselves of the unions in the federation actually did more in their families, their neighborhoods, with their friends, their relatives, and what have you, to get them to vaccinate. So it's not just getting the vaccination, it's actually becoming, if you like, activists around vaccination. And secondly, what more should the government do you think, to get more people to vaccinate? What ideas have you got as COSATU on what the department, parliament, government generally can do to actually get more people to vaccinate? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Honorable Karim. Let me just check. Honorable Peters, are you back? Okay. For those perhaps who might not know, Honorable Karim is our former chairman, myself, and Honorable Mahlang. So if there's anything bad we are doing, blame it on him.
I thought you were going to praise me unnecessarily.
Chairperson, I've got a network problem here. I just hear then it's gone. So I will forgo.
Okay, please come in, Honorable Peters.
I don't even know whether I'm in the meeting.
Yeah, in the meeting. Yeah, I can hear you. Continue. Honorable Peters, please continue. Can hear you. Okay, definitely Honorable Peters is struggling with her connectivity. Can I request Honorable Chairperson to please come in, Mahlangu?
Thank you, Chairperson, and thanks for your comment. Somebody must be blamed
Point of order. Point of order.
Hey, I waited so much for this opportunity for you to say this. Anyway, thank you, Chairperson, and I'm sorry, Honorable Peters, for your connectivity. I know your contributions always give us empowerment and also direction. It assists in us shaping the resolve or recommendations that we need to take to the House. Chair, let me start by appreciating and welcoming the presentation from Comrade Matthew Parks, and will also appreciate that you always avail yourself, like the chairperson have said, even if you don't always get what you want, but you don't become discouraged, you always avail yourself, use any other opportunity that you get to represent the workers. And I think the workers can see that their subscriptions are worth giving to the unions. And I also I'm happy that you are agreeing or supporting the bill. But what I want to check from you, Comrade Matthew, what, from your view, what is it that you can recommend to help government and business in dispersing the 18.1 billion rands that is supposed to help those in need in KZN? We're talking here about the affected, the communities, the business, the workers, the poor, and everyone else. I hear that you are skeptical, or you are emphasizing that they need to be the speedy way or strategy or a system in making sure that this money reaches the people that are expected to benefit from it. So if you have enough advice to can share with us, so that we can look at it, and if we agree, let's also put this as a recommendation to be a resolution of the Houses of Parliament. That will be appreciation. I also want to appreciate that you are, as a federation, not sitting back, encouraging members. You are on the campaign of vaccination. I don't know if also you have something else that you can share with us, that what more can government do differently in terms of encouraging people or private sector or employees generally to take vaccination and boosters, those who have vaccinated. So if you have those ideas, you can share them with us so that we can speed this, because we have seen the benefits as your presentation is indicating. Having said that, Honorable Chairperson, I don't know what is your take, Comrade Matthew. There's this allegation that private sector has made vaccination mandatory. I don't know if I can say I agree or I disagree with it, but we know what is the view or the pronouncement by government. We encourage people to go and vaccinate, and what will be the consequences? Because if it's mandatory, then it says there are conditions attached to that. If you don't vaccinate, then what? what is your take on that one? Because I think you're not only, I know you are not only organizing, or you don't only have members in the public sector, you have members in all the sectors. So there are such rumors, and how do you think government can arrest that, or us as the Appropriations Committee, as we deal with this, what can we do? But also the role that you can play as a union. You have the shop steward on the side floor that can deal with those issues. What is it that you think they can do? I also lastly want to know your role as COSATU in terms of the issue that we all know between the Northwest province and the workers in the Department of Health, the disputes and the disagreement. Were you able to intervene as COSATU? How much do you know? How far are the problems between the Department of Health and the workers in Northwest? I'll leave it at that, Chairperson, and also say that I really appreciate the input that you have made as COSATU to the committee. And we further encourage you that please keep on doing the good work and represent the workers, because those workers, they don't have a choice, they have you. And we know that what we say about organized workers, and also our slogan or a resolution that we took some time in the CC about one country, one federation. So we need to make that difference and make sure that people see the difference. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Honorable Chair. Let me just check. Honorable Peters, are you back?
I'm back, Honorable Chairperson. Can I come in?
Please do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chairperson, and our co-chairpersons, and to Comrade Matthew. I think, like Honorable Chair of the NCOP indicated, Comrade Chair, and you also said it in the beginning and got lost somewhere, and I'm sure Comrade Matthew was actually beaming ear to ear because he saw Parliament actually advocating for a bonus for him, and I think it is good, but he is doing a good work. Like I also said yesterday, their input and his inputs are always available. But equally so, and I think the challenge of speaking last is always a problem. I want to say that it's good that Comrade Matthew indicates that there is this move with regard to vaccination to encourage workers and their families, and that they will be doing a campaign. And the angle that he's taking, that science should be given the space and as opposed to a social media, I think it's very important. But I'm also very impressed that they are taking it from the impact of vaccination over the years, the issues of polio, the issues of measles, and also the fact that even now, when you travel to different parts of the world, you have to vaccinate. I mean, you would remember how a full flight of SAA was returned from Nigeria because many of the passengers did not have the yellow fever certificate. And I think it is important that we encourage our people. The money government is spending on vaccination cannot go nil. So I really appreciate that information and the support that COSATU is giving to the appropriations. But also with SASRIA, I don't know, I heard you well, Comrade Matthew, where you were speaking about households. Private or ordinary households. In my understanding, SASRIA has been focusing mostly on businesses. And I think, Chairperson, last year, when SASRIA appeared before us, we did raise this particular issue because many of our people don't know, unless the brokers inform them, that they can protect themselves in the event of the suffering losses due to political or social unrest through this particular reinsurance initiative that is supported by government. Because there are many people who, during the period of the July unrest, their cars were affected, were burned down. Today they don't have means to travel because they didn't have that cover. A social unrest in their ordinary insurance. So I think it is important that we encourage chairpersons, SASRIA, to open up. I did see their adverts, but they are still targeting mainly companies. But I have heard what other colleagues are saying, and I'm covered. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Honorable Peters. I'm not so you all members are keeping on.
Oh, okay. That had
yeah, beautiful. I can see that.
Yeah.
You are colorful. You are defying winter. Thank you again, Comrade Matthew. Let me thank the honorable members and join them for welcoming the presentation that we have made. My questions, I think Honorable Peters has already started alluding to that, but I'm concentrating. My focus is more on the reach of SASRIA, especially to townships and rural businesses. What do you think should be done to ensure that that happens? Because it became very clear that although there was so much damage in the townships and rural areas, SASRIA was not reaching those places. And now the taxpayers are recapitalizing it to the tune of 18.1 billion rand, which is something that we support. But again, that the businesses in townships and rural areas didn't benefit much on this insurance. What do you think should be done? What are the shortcomings? Because we wouldn't like to see this happening going forward. Secondly, there's a school of thought which says SASRIA was not properly capitalized to deal with the claims of its clients. That's why they were not able to meet. Imagine, for instance, if the big insurance companies that were we are clients to, something happens, then they must go somewhere for recapitalization. What would you say to that? A school of thought which says SASRIA was never properly capitalized. Thirdly, I would like to hear your comment that SASRIA has gone into a panic mode, an exponential increase in the premiums because of this experience. And this comes at the time when the consumers are having all these types of problems and pressures. The businesses are having all these pressures because if my memory serves me well, I may not be 100% correct. I heard somebody talking about a 1,000% increase in the premiums of SASRE, but I may be wrong. But the fact of the matter is there have been an exponential increase in the premiums. What would be your comment be on that one? Then on COVID-19 vaccines, I think I agree fully that one thing that the proverbial silver lining in a dark cloud, that the vaccines have shown that we do have capacity to manufacture locally. Now, having said that, I don't know from your side, you know the other drugs that outside from vaccine that we manufacture and procure locally, because that's very important, that government with its budget should be seen to be spearheading the process of localization. For obvious reasons, you produce locally, it means you are not importing things, so the negative impact on your GDP is out of that, but many other benefits, you increase your economy rather than increasing other people's economy. You employ, you create job opportunities rather than creating other people's jobs when you import. Revenue, SARS has got better revenues, and so on and so forth. So I'm just saying that from your experience, what are the drugs that perhaps we are importing and we're supposed to be producing locally, or we're supposed to be procuring locally? There's always a question of price, right? You find that something, it's let me say for 2 rands cheaper, and people say no, then you are going to import. But the cost to the economy, the social cost to the economy is huge in terms of opportunity cost that I've just referred to. I would like to hear your comment, but once more, thank you very much. I think that was not, unless oral members, there's any other oral member who having a question, or somebody who would like to add in his or her questions. You may shout at me if something has just come up to you. Okay. In the substance of any additional questions, Comrade Matthew, please respond to the questions and the comments that have been made by the honorable members.
Okay, no, thanks very much, Chair. And yeah, thanks, honorable members. I think also, Chairman, partly why we thought we should come today is that we should appreciate when government does do good work. I think on these 2 fronts, you know, in very trying circumstances, and even at times when we did kind of, you know, kick government along, we think of government's good work, and even the work of colleagues in the private sector must be appreciated. So, Chair, I think just on the questions around vaccinations, you know, Honorable Matafa and Karim and Peters and yourselves, Honorable Mahlangu raised quite a few issues. I mean, I think if you look at the history of vaccinations, you know, over many decades, there is always a history of hesitancy. I guess one must appreciate that, you know, democracies are noisy. Human beings by their nature are inquisitive, they're not robots, they don't all think alike. So we've seen in the history of vaccinations that there's often been a significant denialistic tendency. And at times that you would be amazed later on that why was this even a question? I think when you had vaccinations against cholera and other pandemics which had long ago kind of been vanquished, has been there. I think you would remember, Honorable Chair, the rise of Boko Haram in Nigeria about 2 decades ago was partly around the issue of the polio campaigns. And as a consequence, when they went around killing health workers in Nigeria, we saw polio rates rise at a great cost to innocent Nigerians, for example. But I think our position as COSATU has been to support the vaccination, to support science and to support health, and also to kind of emphasize the principle of solidarity. So it's not just a question of about the individual's freedom of right to freedom of belief, etc. But it's also about giving solidarity to society at large. So can we give solidarity to the health workers who are really most exposed to these kind of pandemics, most at risk? But I think, Chair, you know, we all underestimated, I think, the amount of hesitancy we never expected it to be this much. Where we had the discussions at the beginning of last year, and we thought everybody would be on the same page. And I think we all, including ourselves as organized labor, we badly underestimated that half of society just doesn't agree. I think partly like Honorable Karim is saying, because they don't trust government, but I think even beyond that, they don't trust politicians across the political spectrum. They don't trust leaders of society, be it in business or labor, etc. So there is that real kind of split views in society. I mean, I think it points one to the need for us not to take anything for granted. Are we really sure that everybody actually is getting the vaccinations for cholera, for polio, for hepatitis, for mumps, for measles? I think actually we might be taking a lot of things for granted. And these are the kind of things we should actually be investigating going forward. Chair, I think it does point to the need for education at a school level, at a university level, even us as organized labor and society, and the public broadcasters, the media, that we all contribute. I think you will need at times to have a bit of a carrot and stick approach, because Honorable Peters is right to mention that, you know, there are some requirements already. We already have vaccine mandates in some areas. When our kids are born, they're required to get certain vaccinations, you know, immediately at 3 months, 6 months, etc. When you take your kids to schools, you're required to provide the vaccination clinic card. When you travel to yellow fever zones in Africa, likewise. Chair, I think on the logistics front, I mean, it took time for government and business to set up the thing, but I think in the end, when things got moving, we had almost 4,000 sites. It really did work very well. There was some very creative work done as well. You know, you had your drive-through mass vaccination sites. But even then, Chair, the problem was not with government or business. They provided the logistics, the resources, but as society, we failed to mobilize people sufficiently. Because even at some of these mass vaccination sites, you know, there was one in Cape Town, Athlone Stadium, which had a capacity of doing about 4,000 people a day. Cape Town International Convention Center, similarly 4,000 a day. We never even reached beyond about 15% take up a day. I think there has been a fair amount of work, but I think much more should have been done around public relations. So we had this vaccine communications team set up with GCIS, with business, with labor, with community. And it did do a fair amount, especially on the Vuma weekends, etc. We got various role models. In fact, we were quite pleased, and we actually insisted upon the president being the first to get the vaccination and to do so publicly, to send a message that this is safe, this is the right thing to do. Leadership is leading from the front. I think we got a fair amount of sports leaders, and I think we must even acknowledge the religious sector, like the leadership of the ZCC, who publicly came out and took the vaccinations and urged members to do likewise. We saw many of the mainstream churches, for lack of a better word, doing similarly. I don't think we ever found the response to how to manage the dissident element. We saw some of the kind of the new churches openly attacking the vaccinations, and I don't think we ever found a way of doing it, how to deal with it. But I think it points to the need for ongoing education, but it can't just be government, Chair, it needs to be all of us. Chair, so the areas which we noticed we needed a lot of discussion on it, where we did well in the workplaces was in sectors where there's a lot of workers who are unionized. So in the mining sector, teachers, police officers, clothing workers, etc. Where we found to have low vaccination rates was in sectors which has low union membership, like the restaurants, the informal sector, farm workers, domestic workers, parts of the retail sector. We had set up, vaccination sites at some shopping centers with business, and very few people would go out to vaccinate. And those are the kind of retail workers who are not organizing those kind of restaurants that well. Chair, we had done also a bit of work as a leadership of COSATU, of affiliates who would go publicly and take vaccinations. So when the police officers were vaccinated, the Minister of Police or the leadership of POP Crew publicly took photos to tell members to do it. We got a lot of our union leaders to do vaccination messages for public and private media platforms in all languages. I think that helped quite a bit. The Clothing Workers Union used to bombard us daily with JPEGs of different shop stewards from different parts of the country. They'll take a shop steward from Newcastle. I vaccinated, and I encourage you to do the same. I know SATU, the teachers union, basically at one stage we were doing daily vaccination videos to members of the teachers to encourage them to vaccinate and to say what's the progress and so forth. We'd also organized, Chair, with good support from colleagues in the private sector, in some of the pharmaceutical companies, to deploy mobile vaccine sites to our May Day events, to our shop steward councils. Didn't always work as much as we wanted to. And again, one of the interesting things we had seen there, Chair, when we deployed mobile vaccine sites to Limpopo shop steward councils, most of our members had vaccinated. So again, it pointed to that union members tend to be organized and vaccinated, and the unorganized become much more difficult to organize. But I must also say, Comrade Chair, that and to appreciate the kind words from honourable members, but to Honourable Mahlangu, we actually got a lot of attack as COSATU on the vaccination issue. A lot of our own members and members of society were very abusive, and it was unbelievable the amount of kind of flack we took for saying people should vaccinate. We were accused of all sorts of crimes against humanity, etc. I think to the question Honourable Mahlangu raised around the mandatory debate, it's a difficult one. Sure, in common sense, you would say, like other vaccines, you have a mandate, like we do with kids when they go to school and when you travel to yellow fever zones, etc. And there's a logic to it. We haven't supported that. I think we follow the line of the president to say it's voluntary, and our route should be to support the vaccinations, to persuade people to address their fears and their concerns. Some of it just fears because of what people see on social media, and to engage with people. We found that it has worked, but it's hard work, and it is constant work. I think we've become a little bit too complacent on it. We haven't been also keen to see the mandatory route going at the workplace, which has resulted in some workers being dismissed, because we fear it's going to become a polarized debate, it's going to become a distraction, and it brings an unnecessary element of politics to it, and we should be focusing on the health and the solidarity aspects to it. I'm not saying either one is right or wrong. I think there's merits and demerits to all of them. But we've really tried to emphasize, Chair, members, that the point of this thing also is about solidarity, that yes, you might have the right to your belief, but we've all been praising the work of nurses who really have been hit hard by COVID because they're exposed to it at such high concentration levels. And if we want to ease the burden on them, well, then it's about us vaccinating to give that kind of solidarity in that space, so we can reduce the emergency room numbers, and we can help save those nurses' lives, etc. Chair, we have also spent a lot of time working with government, the Department of Health and Labour, colleagues in business on the regulations on how to manage the pandemic at a workplace or public spaces. We try to find the balance, and I don't know if you can always find the right balance. There is always contradictions. So you have, for example, exemption provisions for health reasons, though we know there's very few medical reasons to get an exemption, but we still put it there for religious reasons. We also put in place mechanisms that if you had any side effects, the UF or the compensation fund would come into effect. There's insurance cover as well, the government put into effect. We had also put in place that you would get paid a day off to go and vaccinate and get paid day off if you have any side effects. We've also put in place in the regulations that if a person doesn't want to vaccinate, and there's a requirement by the company for them to do so, we should look at alternative options for them. Can they work remotely, virtually, or other parts of the company where they're not exposed? But there also needs to be a work-based assessment risk. So, if honourable members of parliament, parliamentary staff can work virtually, so you might not require them per se to vaccinate because you're working at your house, for example. But if you're a mine worker and you're working a kilometre underground with 2,000 mine workers, you go into a lift for 30 minutes for 30 mine workers, you're a health worker, then yeah, you're exposed to serious levels of vaccination of COVID, and it's also about the health of your colleagues, the health of medical patients, etc. Honourable Chair, on to the question on Northwest from Honourable Mahlangu. I'm not sure of the details, but I can try to find out information and to revert to Honourable Mahlangu. The other question on the vaccine front, Chair, I mean, we had supported, so I'm not to be a cheerleader for the company Aspen, which has set up the pharmaceutical capacity in Gqeberha, but we've all been calling for local manufacturing pharmaceutical capacity. I think we have kind of stalled along, but we're lucky there is a significant local capacity. We had wanted to see the COVID-19 vaccines help to build that capacity, help to build export lines to Africa, etc. We are quite worried that that factory now is in danger of closing because not getting orders from the rest of Africa and so forth. And in fact, the Department of Health not planning to buy more vaccines because the vaccination rate is so low, they're having to destroy expiring vaccinations. So there's a consequence. We do good work in supporting this pharmaceutical capacity, but now we collapse it because of hesitancy. Chair, we support the issue of buy local, as you say. For us, I think it's about government as the largest procurer in the economy, the private sector, us as trade unions, consumers, we must all support locally produced goods. That's the foundation pillar of the economic recovery plan. That's the best way to save local jobs, to create local jobs. We had done a lot of work with colleagues in government, business, and different trade unions around the medical supply front, because it's not just the vaccine issue. There's the issue of medical textiles, protective shoe wear, the visors, the screens, the PPEs, the syringes, the sanitizers. And I think we found that in 2020, when we set those 7 work streams, we actually managed to quite quickly unlock blockages, help to get contracts and suppliers get into different factories. It really showed you the value of a social compact between business, labor, and government, because we're all in the same boat. We all need to work together to resolve common interests. And of course, Chair, on that issue, also there is an issue around a role for SARS to play a much more vigorous role around enforcing customs duties to prevent us being victims of illegal and cheap subsidized imports coming through. Chair, you also asked about the issue of other medication. I mean, we've had some discussion with the Department of Health around ARVs. Can we not be sourcing these as locally produced medications? We think there's really a significant scope to ramp up it in a significant way. And we think it actually help to secure supplies because it's much easier to go and get your supplies from a factory in Gauteng or the Eastern Cape or Cape Town, wherever, than to wait for it to come overseas. And we've seen with the issue of vaccine hoarding, other countries are not hesitant to shut down exports if the domestic demand requires it. I think just the last thing around the vaccination front, the one difficulty we're having now is that because government has been forced to close some of the vaccination sites because of low demand, it's making it even more difficult for workers in public to go and find where must I vaccinate, etc. They might go to clicks and be told they must make an appointment, come back in a week's time. And those kind of things do kind of detract from it. Chair, Honourable Wright raised important issues which we agree with. And it was to an extent putting a plaster on. And I think government did well, but it wasn't the money government got, without me being a spokesperson for government, the money also went to employ additional health workers, nurses and doctors, medical interns. It did go to help setting up additional sites, but Honourable Wright is right. I mean, there are huge worrying infrastructure gaps, personnel gaps, supply gaps in the Department of Health. And if we look at the MTEF budget allocations for health, we projected a 0.2% increase to health over the MTEF period. So that's in effect, in reality, a cut to health, which makes no sense. Having said that, we do appreciate there is an additional 8 billion rand to help fund the NHI, but still at a macro level, we are not giving more money to health, we're giving less money. That is quite worrying, especially when you look at the large vacancy rates for doctors and nurses and health workers. Chair, I think on the other issues which I didn't mention, to Honourable Moletsani, are we sure the money's gone where it is intended? So there has been a fair amount of work. I mean, at a leadership level, we work quite well with government at a vaccine JSOC, at bargaining council level, at NEDLAC, etc. Nahawu and Denosa, which organize health workers, have gone to court at times to make sure that health workers are given their PPEs. Sector, the clothing workers, did a huge project, which we did a submission to Parliament in 2020 on, I think, where they went to every department in every province to make sure that they have bought locally produced PPEs and that they're in line with the Treasury procurement requirements. And often at times they encountered really worrying indications from different provincial departments. Chair, just on the SASRIA issues, I mean, I think, look, one appreciates that this is uncharted territory for government, for society, for SASRIA. And I think one appreciates that Treasury and SASRIA did try to respond as fast as they can. Treasury came to the party in terms of providing additional resources. So I think for us it's about learning the lessons. We think we need to do much better in future on communications, making sure simple things like the application numbers, the contact information numbers, how to submit your application, how to submit an appeal is done. We think there's a need for much faster physical inspections where necessary. Chair, we're still a year later, still dealing with the Unemployment Insurance Fund, doing physical inspections of companies which have been devastated by the violence. And obviously a year later, the evidence is long gone. And for someone to wait a year to receive the relief is completely unfair. Chair, I think we've also seen that we shouldn't take for granted that this won't happen again. We just had floods in KZN, so we need to really make sure we have a rapid response capacity, make sure there's really a significant education that people know how to do these things. I think, Chair, one other thing which we saw, that the damage might be in Newcastle, for example, and we might assume that's the extent of the damage, but we've also seen that sometimes you have factories downstream which are dependent upon a factory in Newcastle for the product. Maybe Newcastle provides a textile, then it goes to a factory in Bethlehem, which then manufactures it into clothing. We assume at times that the damage is only in Newcastle, yet we forget about the downstream in neighboring areas which didn't have physical violence, but there's a consequence. And at times those companies were inadvertently left behind. Chair, I think the other issue around that one as well is that, which I think you've raised, is that we saw a lot of people falling through the cracks, people who are not insured, people in townships, in rural areas and villages, in informal areas, informal traders were left behind because it is really, in essence, people had insurance cover, whether it's middle-class people or businesses who knew what to do and how to do it, and who submitted the claims. We've seen informal traders basically being left behind. Though there was, I think, some efforts by, eThekwini municipality to assist, but by and large, our experience has been, like you said, that people in townships and rural areas, workers, informal traders were left behind, the uninsured. So I think it doesn't speak to the need for mass consumer education. I think in future we should be going door to door in affected areas, using the ward committees, using maybe community health workers, that kind of infrastructure footprint. We should be also looking at what about the unbanked, what about pensioners who don't know about these things, because these are largely middle class information, if I can use it for lack of a better term. Sure, SASO was capitalized or not, I'm sure it wasn't maybe sufficiently, but I think Treasury did respond. But I think let's learn the lessons, let's prepare for the future. We have been quite dismayed, Chairperson, to see the insurance companies, routinely hike premiums. We think it's simply immoral. It shouldn't just be a question of protecting themselves, but saying what can they do to give solidarity and support to the economy, because government can't do everything and we should be giving support to others. So yeah, I hope I've answered all the questions, Chairperson. Yeah, thanks very much, Chairperson and members.
Much appreciated. Indeed, we've covered all the issues that were raised by the honorable members. And once more, thank you very much for the presentations and the responses, and good luck. Thank you so much. At this point, I'm going to hand over to my co-chairperson, Honorable Mahlangu, to take us through the next session of the meeting with National Treasury. They've just been talking to me. They would like to have more time than what is allocated, and having saved some time from COSATU, I think you may consider that, Honorable Chairperson. Honorable Mahlangu, back to you, and thank you very much, honorable members.
Thank you, Shenge, Ms. Bongel, and honorable members. I think we will follow the same pattern that we've been doing of making sure that we open our videos as and when we speak. But if we are not on the platform, please mute your mic, because we get a feedback from your background. We are now going to request Team Treasury to make a presentation which will be in response to the public hearing presentations and deliberations. I don't know who is leading Team Treasury at the moment.
Mayor Chair, and good morning.
Good morning, Ntate Mohajane. You're welcome with your team. I will hand over to you. How much time do you need?
It's the Masondo. It's the Masondo.
Principal.
As little lady, you find a not teaching.
No, that's
look
this
at
voice. You go to Khorera, hey, honali. That is a man gabos. Kopela tshwarelo PM. Welcome, and I hope members are excited or happy today, and appreciate your welcome, your presence in the meeting. We have been talking amongst ourselves to say we feel like we are not given the attention that we need. At times, we will need to have you because we engage, and some of the issues, they need political intervention or clarity from you. But we have not, from the side of the chairperson, invited you specifically and experience the problem. But we were just saying that it will be a good thing, and we promise the members that if there are issues that need your attention, we would like you to be here. And today we are much honored for you to be here as and when we deal with the responses. Principal Radleboga Menahan, thank you so much, and over to you.
No, thanks, Chair. Memashangu and co-chair of Telesi. I want, and I mean, firstly, we always are available to account to the people through you, because indeed, Chair, you are the tribune of South Africans, of our people. So we always take seriously our responsibility to account to South Africans through you. So as and when we get invited, we will definitely make sure that we avail ourselves, unless there's things that are beyond our control. So as a ministry, we really are serious about the work that we have to do and account to the people of South Africa through you. So thanks for inviting us. So what I will do, I'm going to ask because I think the National Treasury, the team led by Dr. Mampo Modise, DDG for Public Finance, what they always do is to give a technical form to the political choices, to the political decisions that we make, starting from ourselves in National Cabinet and making those recommendations to Parliament through you, for you to eventually make a recommendation for Parliament to say, yes, we agree with the recommendations that do not only come from National Treasury, but come from government or cabinet as a whole, which eventually get tabled for your consideration. And if you are happy with that, we eventually take that through. And again, as usual, that is preceded by the public engagement, because indeed our democracy, it's not a once-off voting exercise. It's a deliberative democracy. We deliberate from time to time. And that is why we always have inputs from our citizens who live up to the idea of being active citizens. So we have considered all the inputs that have been made by the public and yourselves. And we're at the point where the team, guided by the ministry, working with the ministry and colleagues in government, we have now put together a comprehensive response to some of the comments that have been made on the 2022 appropriation bill. So let me hand over chair and co-chair to the National Treasury team, and they will just take us through. And Mampo, you'll also advise how long you'll take in giving this presentation. I've seen it's longer, but I think you could do your best to focus on key points, taking into account that the response is written, it's available for further interrogation or for further reading for colleagues who want to go through our responses as National Treasurer. Over to you, Dr. Modise.
Thank you, DM. Good morning, honorable members and chairpersons. Please allow me to share the screen. So the way we plan to do this, which I hope is okay with the chairs, is that the different teams will give updates on their respective areas, and then I will take the across the issues that impact across the different sectors. So the first person that will do the presentation is Ravesh, and he'll be focusing on the Sasria response. Ravesh, please go ahead.
Good morning, honorable members. Good morning, honorable chairs and DM. Thank you, Mampo, for the presentation. So just to continue along the theme of Sasria, Mampo, if you could kindly move to the next slide. Thanks, thank you. So just to continue on the theme that we left off in terms of Sasria, there were a few questions regarding Sasria. So the first one was just around why was Sasria underfunded and so forth, and considering that it was meant to cover nationwide claims in respect of civil commotion. So in terms of our responses, I think we just want to remind the committees and the honorable members that prior to the July 21 unrest, Sasria was adequately capitalized, and it had a solvency cover ratio of 323%, and it had reserves of 8.5 billion. So there's no need for for government to provide further funding to the entity, as it was financially sustainable with a strong balance sheet. However, following the July unrest, where it had claims of around about 32 billion, it meant that Sasria didn't have sufficient available capital to settle claims of 32 billion. And this, if you recall, was the highest ever claims that Sasria basically had. Compared to 2021, there were claims of 2,000 or 3,000, and then in 2021-22 was claims of around about 21,000. So therefore, Sasria didn't have sufficient capital. It only had 8.5 billion within which to basically settle claims of around about 32 billion. Hence, the provision of the 22 billion for Sasria. And then moving on to the next question, which was basically broken up in two parts. It was just around the increases reaching 1,736%, and then also whether the new premiums will be sufficient to handle a similar situation. So if you look at the increases, the premium increases that Sasria has now implemented, it was looking at claims in terms of exposures and also related to a fundamental change in SASRIA's loadings in terms of its various clientele. So it basically specifically related to the reinsurance premium charge to SASRIA, because at the moment with the unrest, what has happened is that the reinsurance premium for SASRIA has now increased substantially. So in terms of the reinsurance premium quoted, it's now been incorporated into the SASRIA, into the SASRIA increases to its clients. Hence, the correction is not related to a correction in how SASRIA views its risk. So we just need to make sure that it's not because of how SASRIA perceives it, but it's because of the fact that SASRIA's reinsurance premiums have now increased, and the reinsurers are now looking at SASRIA as a very high risk based on the July unrest, and also there are risks that similar events may happen. And then they've also looked at the different classes as well, which is hence the increase looking at 1,736 tons. It relates to the two new classes, which relates to the heavy commercial vehicles and also to commercial vehicles, since there was significantly high losses from these type of policies. Then to the second part of the question is that SASRIA premium should not be priced in order to fully cover, in order to fully cover situations similar to the July 2021 event. So I think in terms of this, what SASRIA is looking at is that there should be other means to cover such such large severity, low frequency events such as reinsurance, for example. Hence, from SASRIA's point of view, it should not be expected that the premium alone will be sufficient to cover SASRIA in the event of another catastrophic event. So I think SASRIA is now embarking on a journey with National Treasury to look at how does it look at trying to cover or extend its reach to to the other relevant stakeholders, and to explore any inherent shortcomings, and to also find a long-term solution that would be mutually beneficial to all relevant parties. And I think just to the last question that was posed, I think from Mr. Park's presentation, in terms of how why does it take so long for the assessments to be done and the payouts to be done? I think when we consulted SASRIA, I think the major problem or the challenge that they have is with regards to the fact that the clients take a long while to formulate the claims. So I think that, work needs to be done there with the clients to formulate the claims so that it can be settled. And then looking at the payout of the claims as well, it's done according to a site plan or to a project management team. So as and when there is a different structure being built, then these funds will be released according to a project plan. So it's not released all in one time. But I think, Chair, what we would like to highlight on behalf of SASRIA is that if a event of a similar nature, even if it's as small as 3 billion, could happen in the next 6 months or a year, then it will result in SASRIA being in the red again in terms of not meeting its solvency cover ratio of 100%. So at the moment, it is striving to meet its its solvency cover ratio of between 100 and 120% by at least June 2022. But the risk does exist that if there is an event similar to the one in July, then it may negatively impact SASRIA. Marco, thank you. That's all from my side in terms of SASRIA.
Thank you so much, Ravesh. Chairperson, I'm just going to share the bigger presentation now. Thank you. So, Chairperson, I think the first one that I wanted to respond to was the issue around the bounce back guarantee scheme. And basically, the honorable members were asking us what makes it different this time around, and what have we done to improve the scheme. So learning from the loan guarantee scheme that we had previously and engaging with stakeholders, what the biggest 3 changes that we have done to the scheme was, one, we are not requiring any collateral. So before, the businesses had to have collateral to have access to the scheme, but we realized that because of the events that took place, most of these businesses don't have collateral. The second thing is that government takes the first 20% losses. Before, these losses were taken by the commercial bank, making it a bit difficult for the small businesses to access the scheme. And then thirdly, we including non-banks into the mix, just to ensure that there's accessibility. And we think with these three major changes, of course, there's other smaller changes there and there, but with these three major changes, we think the accessibility of the scheme will be much more, especially for the small entities. And then this slide just gives you basically a quick summary of who qualifies and what are the turnover requirements. I'll just ask Gillian to go through the administrative services responses. Gillian, please go ahead.
Thank you, honorable members. Good morning, chairpersons and honorable members. Mampu, I will from slide 10, please. Yeah, the first issue that I want to address the committee is COSATU raised concern over the reduction of 4% in the 2022-23 baseline of the Department of Home Affairs. Concerns were raised of the impact of the reduction on frontline service delivery, and it's already in the stress. The response is the operational baseline of the Department of Home Affairs was not reduced. The percentage decrease is due to self-financing. So every year an amount is added to the baseline in the form of self-financing, and that is utilized for the production of your civic documents. In the current appropriation bill, an additional amount of 267 million was also allocated in the 2022-23 financial year, and also the carry through in the subsequent outer 2 years for the department to fill vacant positions and to improve the frontline service delivery. The other two issues that was raised under National Treasury, there was a concern raised by SAICA on the SARS budget, that it was at insufficient funds for the implementation of the GRAP, and that it cannot successfully fulfill its mandate. SAICA also seen an increase of satisfaction on operational queries that was raised with the Office of the Tax Ombud. Our response is an additional amount of 1 billion was allocated to SARS in the 2022-23 financial year. SARS did comply with the GRAP practice. There's only one aspect they're busy implementing, that is recognize or estimate the tax revenue on an accrual basis. So they're busy implementing a new system to give effect to that principle. 4 million was allocated towards the project, and only a small amount of 40,000 was spent up to date. The Minister of Finance did afford SARS an additional period to fully comply to the GRAP principles. And then an issue was also raised around IRBA. Fact was raised of the long-term financial sustainability of the entity in the light of the court judgment to repay auditors an amount of 60 million. Our response is a judgment by the North Gauteng High Court for the review and setting aside of certain fees prescribed by IRBA in the 19 and 20 and 2021 financial years will have an impact on the operational budget of IRBA going forward. IRBA also appealed against the judgment, and the appeal was launched on the 6th of May. We are concerned that the impact of the insurance fees will impact on the income stream of IRBA. They are looking at new ways how to generate income going forward. National Treasury will then fully engage still with IRBA on the shortfall in the operational budget. Thank you.
Thanks. Good morning, honorable members. It's Rendani here. I will take you through the issues raised for the security cluster. Starting with the issue raised by SAICA on the reduction of the NPA's budget by 400 million. For the 2022 MTF and 2021 MTF, there was no baseline reduction on the NPA budget. What's happening is that for the 2022 MTF, there's an additional 262 million, which was allocated to the NPA for the capacitation of various units within the NPA, units such as the investigative directorate, sexual offenses, asset forfeiture, and general prosecution. So next slide, please. There was an issue which was also raised by the Parliamentary Budget Office regarding the composition of the budget, mainly that 46% of the budget goes towards goods and services. What is the main function of the department? This it's a good sign because it shows that almost half of the budget goes towards service delivery. This is the department that supports military veterans, and in terms of the act, they must provide various benefits like education, health, skills development, and empowerment. So the goods and services budget mainly caters for health, skills development, empowerment, and transport. For example, over the MTF, the department plans to provide 3,000 military veterans with access to training and skills development, whereas it also plans to provide health services for approximately 19,000 military veterans. So basically, that's what explains why 46% of the budget goes towards goods and services. So it's a good sign. Next slide, please. Okay, and then on police, there was an issue regarding procurement of ammunition by police from DINAL, and police cannot do business with an entity which is not compliant, especially with regard to such matters like a security clearance. And the advice was that they must approach, police must approach the National Treasury for deviation. So important to note is that effective from April, the delegation to approve deviations now lies with the accounting officers. And secondly, this an issue raised by SAICA that the Financial Action Task Force made a recommendation, among others, that the DPCI should be provided with more staff, especially financial investigators and forensic accountants. And the allocation to the DPCI seemed not to show any intent by government to meet its commitment. It must be noted that the DPCI was capacitated even before South Africa received this recommendation from FATF. The 2020 MTF allocated almost $1 billion to the DPCI. And currently, as we speak, the challenge within DPCI is not a money issue. It is a skills shortage problem. For the past 2 years, they've been underspending mainly because they can't get the specialized skills like forensic investigators. I think also it is worth noting that within this cluster, there's competition for the forensic capability. SIU, they need that capacity. FIC, they need that capacity. NPA, they need that capacity, as well as the DPCI. There's a lot of cannibalism in this cluster. So, but in short, for the DPCI is not a money problem, it's a skill shortage problem. There was also an issue raised around the differences between what is stated in the budget documents, like budget review, vis-a-vis what is in the appropriation bill in respect of the allocation given to police services vis-a-vis police. We must note that we have adopted a functional approach to budgeting, and we have got a technical group called police services. Police services, basically, it's all those entities that report to the Minister of Police, of which South African Police Service is one of them, IPID, civilian, and SIRA. So the difference is that police services includes all of those, whereas police, it's only an allocation that goes towards the Department of Police itself, hence the discrepancy. Next slide, please. I think there was also an issue raised around the 4 billion underspending in the Department of Police. And again, an assessment that the police will be supported by an increase of 8.7 billion in the medium term. This requires unpacking. It must be noted that the 4.1 billion, it was as a result of, there was an additional allocation given to the police for the PPEs in 2020. And at the time, when the quotations were done, were based on international prices, and locally we didn't have a lot of manufacturers. But as time goes on, there were a lot of manufacturers, including other ways, for example, the use of cloth masks vis-a-vis the use of disposable masks. So, and that resulted in lower prices and hence underspending in police. I think there was something like 4 billion allocated for PPEs. The additional funding of 8.7 billion over the MTF is to rejuvenate and improve the policing capacity through the appointment of 12,000 entry-level constables. Of this additional funding, 2.9 billion is allocated to cover costs arising from the 2021 public sector wage agreement. Important to note is that this 2.9, it's only in the current financial year, pending the finalization of the new agreement. So when the baseline is calculated for police over the MTF, if one wants to get the real picture, we have to strip out the 2.9 billion, because at the moment when it is calculated, the 2.9 billion is included. It appears as if the baseline is decreasing or the growth itself, whereas there's this once-off allocation, which doesn't have the carry-through cost pending the finalization of the new wage settlement. Next slide, please. So, and lastly, there was an issue around the allocation that goes towards protection services, one of which is VIP protection, and that's program 5 in police. The number of protection and security officers is informed by the cabinet memorandum on the risk management support system approved by cabinet. And therefore the budget size of the protection and security services program takes into account the number of staff required in the program as informed by this cabinet memorandum. It states that the norms and standard in respect of the deployment of police officials. Important to note is that that program also caters for the critical infrastructure or stroke, the national key points, international airports, some critical infrastructure like parliament and the like. So, and again, that capacity, because those are Police Services Act employees, they also get deployed for in case if there are other pressing needs like riots and stuff like that. But most importantly, in our discussion with police, is just to contain spending in respect of overtime, especially that this is human resource driven. I think that's the last slide from me. Thanks, Chairperson.
Good morning.
Thank you, DM. Who is that?
Good morning, Honourable Chairperson. This is Mark Bletcher. If I can proceed to talk briefly about health and social development. Okay, if we can go into the next slide, please. So I'll start on social development. So most of the inputs pertaining to social development pertain to the way forward with the SRD COVID-19 350 grant, which doesn't really pertain so much to the current budget, the 22 budget that the committee is being asked to pass. It pertains more actually to next year's budget. But I'll talk briefly to three of the comments that came in, and also just to use it as an opportunity to update some members of the committee on some work that's being done. So firstly, the FFC said that we need to do work looking at the long run effect of the sustainability of the 350 grant, but also that there needed to be a timeline on decision making. So on the sustainability, we've been doing quite a bit of work in the Treasury. The Minister has appointed 3 working groups, one on social assistance, one on active labour market policies, including standard public works programs, and one on social security. Each of them are doing quite a number of projects. And there's also some interaction with the other departments. And we met with the Presidency in Social Development, for example, on last Sunday for 2 hours. Now, the sustainability is a very big issue on this grant, because if it were to continue, our preliminary work suggests that it would cost something like 48 to 50 billion next year, and would cost about something like 70 billion within 5 years. So these are very large amounts, and that's not even if you adjust them for inflation. So if you start adding inflation to the 350 grant, it starts reaching 88 billion by year 5. And if you increase it to the food poverty line, it starts going up to 125 billion. So because these amounts are so large, and because this is not funded at all currently in the 23 budget, it's funded to the tune of 44 billion in the 22 budget. This would almost certainly require tax increases into the following year. Such large amounts could not be funded through reprioritization from other votes. They could also not really be funded through significant deficit increases, because the deficit is already very high. So if this 350 grant were to continue, it almost certainly would require tax increases. With respect to the timeline, we hope that this work will be done by the MTBPS, that we'll have information available by the MTBPS. But of course, there's quite a large political process around the options that should succeed the 350 grant. And I'm not quite sure how long that process will take. Then COSATU also speaking about the 350 grant, also welcomed it, and they suggested that besides that it should be adjusted by inflation, they also suggested that it should be linked to skills training programs and to help recipients find jobs. So that's quite an important comment from COSATU, because if one looks at for example, the quarterly labor force survey, it's slightly more positive, the survey released yesterday. But I mean, we know the unemployment in youth in South Africa is actually the highest in the world. And whereas the 350 grant is good or very good, in a sense, it's not sufficient for young people. Young people need skills, they need jobs. And the question is, if one starts looking at what goes beyond a short-term COVID grant, one needs to look at what is the bigger picture of interventions that's required. And to some extent, to what extent, if employment interventions are being scaled up, is grant being scaled down, for example, or what is the balance between them? So that's some of the work. Some of that work is continuing, and the presidency has also been working on a Put South Africa to Work strategy. And so this balance between, in a sense, income replacement and jobs and work and skills is a very important thing, particularly for young people. Okay, then next slide, please. And then, sorry, just one other point, which I can, just one other point on the previous slide that Kasatu raised, is they felt that it was callous that the increase in the foster care grant was only 1.4%. So just to talk briefly about that. So in this budget, a new grant, in a sense, was introduced, which is for orphans, double orphans. And that's costing around 600 to 800 million from the 22 budget. And in a sense, this is a bit like a kind of public sector replacement of life insurance in the private sector. So it will be a grant for orphans. So now there'll be three grants for three grants for children. I'm not including the care dependency grant, but so there's the child support grant, which is 480. The new extended grant for double orphans will be 50% higher than the child support grant. So that's 720. And the foster care grant is 1070. Now, one of the reasons, besides the budget shortfall, that the increase was below inflation on the foster care grant was a thought that there should be some bringing a little bit closer together of this orphan grant and the foster care grant. Partly because a lot of the current recipients of the foster care grant are in fact double orphans who actually then living with family. But the problem is to get the foster care grant, they have to go through a high court process, and it also takes up a lot of social worker time. So it's going to be interesting to see in the period ahead to what extent some people shift from foster care grants, or particularly new applicants shift from foster care grant to extended child support grant. But we may need to revisit this, and Parliament's guidance in this regard would be useful in subsequent years, what the relative ratio should be between the basic child support grant, the extended child support grant, and the foster care grant, how they should be sized relative to each other. And just on Amandla Mobi, so they were again calling for the basic income grant, and criticizing the budget for budget cuts on social spending, and reducing spending on social spending. So just to comment that members will recall that the budget 2021 did place huge spending reductions on many votes. And it was partly because of the lockdown of the economy for so many months, which had a massive effect on tax revenue. Now, budget 22 then puts 282 billion back on spending. And in fact, the social development actually was the department that got the highest additional allocations in budget 2022. And the share of spending that's gone to social development, partly because of the 350 grant and the orphan grant and an attempt to try and fix the cuts that had happened to social grants, the share of social development has actually increased from about 12.5% to 13% of the budget. So even though a lot of votes are declining, and those observations are true because of those cuts in the 21 budget, in fact, the share of social development is actually increasing, and it was the greatest benefit in the 22 budget. Next slide, please. Honourable members, just coming on to health. So SAICA made an interesting point that for medical legal, which is a big pressure on the health sector, where the provincial health departments get sued, and there's also a very big issue in the private sector as well, that there's no provision for contingent liabilities.